Hello, my name is Adam Sapaniak, and I am the director of the New Jersey State Library's Talking Book and Braille Center. Our library around the state is simply known by our initials TBBC. Maya Angelou wrote, "You really can't know where you are going until you know where you have been." This is our plan for today's presentation. TBBC has gone from an unfunded mandate of the legislature to one of the state library's most well-known and most satisfying programs. This presentation was recorded in advance, but the chat feature is live. We will be monitoring questions and comments entered in the chat, and time permitting, we will try to address them at the end. I would now like to introduce today's presenters. They are Elizabeth Burns, who is our head of reader services, Stephen Felly, our outreach librarian, and Jennifer Apgard, our youth services librarian. TBBC's journey is an interesting one. I'd like to begin today's program by introducing Elizabeth Burns. Liz?
Thanks, Adam. And we are actually starting way back in 1796. Because 1796 is when the state library was established, and TBBC is part of the New Jersey State Library. Here is an illustration of what the state library looked like in 1881. TBBC is also a network or regional library of the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. And that library, NLS, was established in 1931 with the Pratt-Smoot Act. And here we have photographs of Representative Ruth Pratt and Senator Reed Smoot, who established that act, who put together that act, and that basically establishes the library, NLS, to be part of the Library of Congress, and to establish select libraries to serve as local or regional centers for the circulation for books for adults with vision loss. So it started with adults for vision loss, and over the next 90-odd years expanded to include people of all ages that are blind, low vision, or print disabled. Things started with Braille, but shortly, and on the next slide, you can see by 1935, books were on audio. And at that time, the technology was records and record players. So here on the left is a photograph of a bunch of NLS listener patrons listening to one of the audiobooks on a record player. And on the right is an image from the talking book titles of 1935 to 1937, which list what some of the latest books from the 1930s were that had been added to the collection. If you're interested in what some of those first audio titles were, they ranged in everything from the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution to Shakespeare's plays and some of Kipling's work. Here we're now in the 1940s, and the photograph on the screen is of two US airmen listening to one of the NLS audiobooks on a record player. And there's also a container marked US government that the record player and the records were sent in. When NLS began in 1931, part of the motivation for a library for adults with who are blind was the World War I vets returning from the front who were blind or with vision loss from war injuries. Veterans have always been an important part of the patrons who NLS serves and TBBC serves. It was true in the 30s and 40s, and it is still true today. Next slide, please. This brings us up to the 1950s, and basically the time before 1967 when our library was established. You might be thinking, hey, what was going on between 1931 when NLS was established and 1967 when the New Jersey State Library Talking Book and Braille Center was established? And the answer is New Jersey patrons were still getting Braille and audio, but they were getting it from the Library for the Blind that was part of the Free Library of Philadelphia. And what you're looking at now on the screen, one is a newspaper article with some narrators and authors talking about the books that they've recorded for NLS and how Philadelphia is providing those recorded materials for New Jersey residents. And on the right is a copy of a memo from the 1960s talking about the importance of establishing a library in New Jersey for New Jersey residents so that they can get better service and quicker service. And that brings us all to 1967. And now Stephen's going to talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Liz. So in 1967, the Talking Book and Braille Center was founded as the New Jersey Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. Here we have a newspaper article from back then which covered our opening. The article features a picture of our original building on Calhoun Street. On this slide, we have another press picture showing our original building. Beneath that picture, we have another newspaper article clipping showing the ribbon cutting ceremony. New Jersey Governor Richard Hughes was in attendance that day. On this slide, we have clippings from newspaper articles from the 1960s. The clippings feature pictures of former TBBC employees, Ellen Gearson and Donald Sanders. One important thing to note about both of these individuals is that they themselves are visually impaired. This shows that we've been employing individuals with visual impairment ever since our early days. I also want to quickly mention that I think Donald has some amazing hair in this picture. Some styles are truly timeless. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jen.
Thanks, Stephen. So this brings us to our next decade, the 1970s, full of great music and cool fashion choices, at least in my own opinion. This is a fun photo representing our mail delivery service, even back in the 1970s. It's of a mail carrier handing talking books to a user. Throughout the years, we've seen a myriad of technology from NLS. In the 1970s, the newest technology was introduced and 4-track cassettes were introduced. This allowed recording on each side of the cassette, reducing the amount of cassettes needed for each book. With this latest technology, the amount of cassettes needed to record a book were much less than recorded discs, therefore reducing the amount of mail needed to be sent. NLS has always been looking at ways to continue to streamline their services, and this is just one example. This slide shows an image on the left with cassette tapes in their carrier compared to the recorded discs in their carrier. The image on the right is of 4 volumes of Braille, the cassette player, and the record player. Here is another photo of mail collection and delivery. It's of a person pushing a mail hamper. This is still reflective of how we do mail delivery now, and we may even have that exact mail hamper still back in our shipping department. This also reflects when we moved to a different location to Olden Ave, and that was around 1972. Here is a press clipping from our 10th anniversary celebrating what we were then called the Library for the Blind and Handicapped. The headline reads, 10th Anniversary Library for Blind and Handicapped Celebrates Birthday. And now here we are celebrating the 55th anniversary. Time really does fly. And the image on this slide is of that press clipping reflecting that headline and the images from that day. Here is a photo from 1979 in a newspaper article showing a librarian demonstrating talking books at Cumberland County Library. It also shows how long we have worked with public libraries. And now back to Liz.
And that brings us to the 1980s. And in the 1980s, we moved to the location we are at now, 2300 Stuyvesant Avenue. Construction began in October 1980, and we had a formal opening in October 1982. And on the screen right now is a copy of the invitation and program for that formal opening here at Stuyvesant Avenue. One of the features for the new location at Stuyvesant was art, and art being accessible for our patrons. On the screen are photos of 2 of the art installations that from the 1980s. On the left is a photo of a statue of a head, and on the right is a column. It's a column that has Braille on it. It is still in our atrium today, and in that photograph, a Braille reader is reading the Braille on that column. The 1980s also saw the beginnings of the Fall Festival, a big celebration we have here at TBBC where patrons come and we get to meet the patrons, and we have programs and things like that. We have right up on the screen parts of 2 of our newsletters about the Fall Festival, and I'm saying Fall Festival, but the top one is actually about a spring festival in the 1980s. None of us were around there, so we don't know for sure if that was the actual first fall festival in spring. Then there's also a heading from when we were NJLBH for the fall festival in 1985. Shows fall festival 1984 newsletter, a newspaper article about our fall festival with a picture of a seeing eye dog who's absolutely adorable, and also a picture of our patrons at one of the fall festivals from the 1980s talking with each other and vendors. The fall festival has always been a day where patrons come, and we, depending upon what's going on, we have performers, we have speakers, there's crafts, there's been a petting zoo, there's been a wide variety of things going on with the fall festival. And little bit of a spoiler, we still have the fall festival, and our next one is coming up on October 15th, 2022. More about that a little bit later. 1983 saw the beginning of Audiovision at the library. Audiovision was our news recording service, and with that, we had volunteers record local news, everything from articles to obituaries, and then that news was broadcast that same day or the next day over the radio. As time went by, it was also something that you could listen to over your computer. Here we have two photographs from when we were doing Audiovision. On the right-hand side is a patron listening to Audiovision through the computer. And the way we know that she's doing that is there's a big sign on the computer that says that it's our Audiovision program. The other photograph here is actually taken from the control room of Audiovision, looking into one of our recording booths where two of our volunteers are recording some of the news. Audiovision was a very popular program, and we stopped it a few years ago, basically because there were other ways for people to get the news, such as NFB Newsline. And here we have another volunteer at the library. We see them recording some of the news that we would have on Audiovision. And the next slide brings us to 1986. And the Friends of the Library being formally incorporated in 1986. And what you're seeing up there is the logo for the Friends. It says Friends of the New Jersey Library for the Blind and Handicapped. And the Friends have always been an important part of TBBC. We'll be mentioning them a couple of times coming up because they've just supported us and supported our programs through the decades. And here's another image of one of the fall festivals from the late 80s. And this one shows a room full of our patrons listening to a presenter. And with that, we're bringing it to the 1990s, and Stephen's going to take over again.
Yes, thank you, Liz. I'd love to cover one of my favorite decades, the 1990s. TBBC has been doing youth programs for many years. Here we have a photo from a children's story time we hosted in April of 1990. The photo shows several children sitting on the floor listening to a story reader. In April of 1990, I was still 2 years from being born myself. Here we have a photo of 4 of our summer reading participants from the summer of 1991 sitting together on a shelf. And here we have a picture of another group of readers from 1991. In the picture, we have a family sitting on a couch reading a Braille book, and another child sitting on the floor reading a second Braille book. Here we have 2 pictures from our 1995 Fall Festival. The photo on the top right shows people standing at a table showcasing technologies for the visually impaired. The photo on the bottom left shows 2 individuals looking at a computer, which was a part of the showcase. So now I want to talk about something very important that happened in the 90s, the Chafee Amendment. Passed in 1996, the Chafee Amendment was an amendment to U.S. copyright law. Named after its sponsor, Senator John Chafee from Rhode Island, the Chafee Amendment drastically changed how TBBC could provide books to patrons. Before the Chafee Amendment, TBBC and NLS had to get permission from copyright holders before recording books for our patrons. After the Chafee Amendment was passed, we were now able to record any book published in the US without copyright holder permission as long as certain conditions were met. This was game-changing, as it means we now have some audiobooks you cannot find anywhere else. On this slide, we have a picture of Senator Chafee from his days in the Senate. Going along with that, on this slide, we have a selection of books that TBBC recorded in-house for our patrons. These books cover topics of local interest to New Jersey. Examples include On This Day in New Jersey History by Joseph Bilby and Superstorm, 9 Days Inside Hurricane Sandy by Catherine Mills. And with that, I'm now going to pass it back again to Jen.
Thanks, Stephen. So starting around 2004, we introduced American Sign Language Story Hours at the library. Students from the local Deaf and Hard of Hearing School, Marie Katzenbach School for the Deaf, as well as students from special needs schools and homeschoolers were invited to attend. We also invited a different storyteller each month to read a story to the children, followed by an educational component. ASL interpreters were always provided. The 3 images on this slide are of various story times held at TBBC. The top left is when the Trenton Thunder were the guest readers and is a photo of the Trenton Thunder mascot acting out the story being read, the ASL interpreter, and the Trenton Thunder staff member reading the story. The top right photo is of children interacting with props from a story time. And the bottom photo is of children posing with photos of a penguin and a staff member from Jenkinson's Aquarium holding a real penguin. So as we've mentioned, we've been hosting our fall festival for many, many years. Here are 2 images from our fall festival in 2005, which is being held at our building. The top left is of presenters at the fall festival and an ASL interpreter. And the bottom right photo is of attendees petting a dog. For some time, we had the 10 Squared Club. That was a club for those seasoned patrons of our library who jumped into a new decade and reached 100 or more years old. This is an image of one of our celebrations with library patrons, both old and young. The young gentleman in the middle is a library patron who was invited to entertain the honorees for that day. And I'll send it back on to Liz.
Thanks, Jen. I had mentioned the support that the Friends of the Library provides to us, and one of the examples is 2006 and Disney on Ice, where we had a special story hour at Disney on Ice, and it was a result of a partnership with the New Jersey Friends and the Alan Miller Public Relations Limited Group. So a group of our young patrons and their families went to Disney on Ice, and in addition to being able to enjoy the ice show, they got a special story hour. They got to meet the characters, and there was even a dinner afterwards. Here are 2 photographs from that special day. On the left-hand side, you see Belle, the Disney character, reading a story to our patrons. And on the right-hand side, you see our patrons interact with one of the dwarfs from Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, and I'm pretty sure it is Doc that they are talking to. 2006 saw the introduction of our Vision Van. We're located in Trenton, but we have patrons all over the state, and we also do outreach and programs all over the state. How do we get there? Well, in 2006, the answer was the Vision Van. Which we drove to fairs and events and programs. The Vision Van was covered with different slogans and things like that. The picture here shows the TBBC logo, our different phone numbers, our website. It says Braille, it says all sorts of things on it. You could see the Vision Van coming from miles down the road. Unfortunately, due to the amount of mileage we put on the Vision Van, we no longer have that. However, we do still go across the state, all over. It's just not as, the van is not as well decorated as it was in 2006. 2007 saw the addition of more art to the art collection at TBBC. Here are photographs of 2 life-size statues donated by Seward Johnson. On the left-hand side, there is a statue of an adult standing up with a backpack on, and 2 of our patrons nearby, you know, the same size as the statue, because as I said, it's life size. And on the right-hand side, is a picture of a statue of a person sitting and reading a book to a child, and the book is open, and it is actually a print Braille book so that you can read the Braille in the storybook on that. And two of our young patrons are sitting next to that as if they too are enjoying the story being read by the statues. And that brings us back to Stephen now.
Thank you. So on this slide, we have a picture of the 2007 ribbon cutting for our Regional Technical Assistance Center, otherwise known as the RTAC. The RTAC was done in partnership with the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. The RTAC houses some of the latest assistive technologies that are available to visually impaired individuals. The RTAC is also where TBBC hosts its LEAP classes, which we will touch on during a later slide. The picture on this slide here shows the ribbon cutting with several individuals in attendance. On this slide, I would like to talk about an important fall festival we once had, our 2009 Fall Festival. During this festival, we had a student driver race car equipped with a second steering wheel visit the library. This allowed our patrons who were in attendance that day to try driving a race car themselves. Here we have a quick video of that I would like to show everyone.
And when I heard that the Library for the Blind was having this thing here, and I'm hearing about some of the stuff that's coming up the pike in terms of technology that might allow me someday to be able to drive again, that I decided I'm going to have to come up here.
So what we wanted to do was break barriers and create opportunities so that people would have the same opportunities that everybody else has and takes for granted.
I might have to think about becoming a race car driver someday.
I hope everyone was able to enjoy that. So here on this slide, we have some more pictures from that fall festival. The two pictures on the top row show TBBC patrons in the driver's seat of the race car, ready to go. The picture on the bottom left shows more patrons waiting their turn to get in the race car, and the picture on the bottom right shows the race car itself. Next slide. Our 2009 Fall Festival was an extra special occasion because it also marked our name change from the New Jersey Library for the Blind and Handicapped to the Talking Book and Braille Center. Congressman Rush Holt was in attendance for the ribbon cutting, as seen in the picture in the top left. The picture in the bottom right shows a proclamation by then Governor John Corzine dedicating the occasion as New Jersey State Library Talking Book and Braille Festival Day. And now Jen once more.
So in 2010, this was one of the events we attended at the Trenton Thunder baseball stadium with staff from Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired and players from the New Jersey Lightning Beep baseball team, New Jersey's first baseball team for blind athletes, as well as Trenton Thunder mascot, and all of them are featured on the image on this slide. Next slide. Here are 3 images of the various summer reading programs we have hosted at the library. In 2005, we had an end of summer program hosted at the library to reflect the theme of that year, which was a medieval theme. The image on the left showcases staff of the library and summer reading participants. In the image on the top right, participants were able to feel what armor may have felt like during that era. And the bottom, or over the years, we have changed and adapted what our summer program has been like. Though we still offer a summer program, it is a bit different now than what it looked like in 2005. The bottom photo on the slide is an image of packages and mail bins, and this is what our summer program looks like now. We create packages throughout the summer and send them to all participants who have registered at the start of the summer. Again in 2010, we were invited to a Please Touch tour hosted by the Barnum and Bailey Circus. Patrons and their family were invited to a tour before the start of the circus that allowed a hands-on experience of various circus equipment, like the juggling pins held by a circus clown and a patron getting to feel that in the image on the left, and were able to pet some of the animal stars of the circus, as seen in the image on the right of a child holding a white cane petting a donkey.
Thanks, Jen. By 2011, we also had our first and biggest change in technology since the introduction of the cassette player way back in the 1970s. And that was the introduction of the digital talking book player and digital talking books. Instead of books being stored on records or on cassettes, the audiobooks were now digital, and you could read them in one of two ways. You either could have a cassette that was basically a flash drive with the book preloaded on it mailed out to you, or you could download it yourself over something called BARD that we still use, Braille and Audio Reading Download. The pictures here on the left is a picture of the digital talking book player, which is used to play that digital audio book, and also a picture of that cassette in a blue holder. And the other picture here is a picture of all the thousands and thousands of books that we had in blue mailing containers. Each book, each DB number was on its own cartridge. So if you wanted to listen to one book, you got one cartridge in a book. Now, when we first started with the digital talking books, it was a great advancement. And if you could download the books, you had access to almost all the books in our collection. But if you're waiting for things to be mailed to you, well, I'll be honest, we didn't get a lot at the beginning. We got them in dribs and drabs. So the question came how to make sure that our patrons had full access to these books, especially those who weren't able to download the books using that BARD system. So in 2011, we also came up with our Outspoken Library. And there's a photograph here of the Outspoken Library. Basically, that was a program that we ended up being at over 40 locations, including public libraries, where we took a computer, we put accessible software on it. So if someone used the computer, they had accessible software for using both the computer or going to the internet. And we also preloaded hundreds and hundreds of the audiobooks that we had onto the computer. So if someone was interested in listening to one of our books on their machine, instead of having to download it through BARD, or instead of having to wait in the mail for it to come from us, they could go to one of these Outspoken libraries. And the photo you see here is of our own Adam Zapaniak at one of the very first Outspoken Library kiosks, and it was at the New Jersey Veterans Memorial Home in Vineland. And on the next slide, we have another image of an Outspoken library where we just have a slightly different look for the kiosk. We changed our branding a little bit. And at that point, our Outspoken library computers were all on laptops. And this brings us back to Stephen.
Thank you. So on this slide, I would like to talk about a great fundraiser that TBBC has been doing for years, our Golf Classic. The Golf Classic lets golfers come together, play a great round of golf, and donate to an even greater cause, our library. On the left side of the screen, we have a flyer that went out to promote our original Golf Classic in 2012. On the right side of the screen, we have pictures of actual golfers who attended the Golf Classic that day. One great thing about the Golf Classic is that we've had a number of actual blind golfers join us over the years. Now I want to talk about our BARD Library Pilot Program. Launched in 2012, the BARD Library Pilot Program built off the idea of the Outspoken Library in that it helped TBBC patrons get their books directly from their local library. The program enables local libraries to do this by allowing their librarians to download books from BARD for local TBBC patrons. This was done with special permission from NLS. Since its launch 10 years ago, the BARD Library Program has grown to include almost 100 public libraries in New Jersey. Here I would like to talk about the time Miss New Jersey 2013, Kara McCollum, visited TBBC. Kara did a great job advocating for TBBC during her visit. She even stayed to narrate a book for our collection. This picture on the slide shows Kara narrating the book in our recording studio, complete with a microphone and headset setup. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jen once more.
Thanks, Stephen. So in 2013, we moved our fall festival to the grounds for sculpture in Hamilton, New Jersey. The grounds have been very gracious in hosting our fall festival. We invited vendors and speakers to attend and offered workshops throughout the day. The grounds also offered a guided walking tour, inviting library patrons on a docent-led touch tour, allowing participants the chance for a truly hands-on tour of various sculptures. These two images are of attendees at the Fall Festival at the grounds for sculpture. The image on the left is a child touching a sculpture, and the image on the right is of attendees posing in front of another sculpture. As I mentioned earlier, NLS is always looking for the latest and greatest ways to streamline their services and make them as accessible and convenient as possible. This brings us to the introduction of the BARD mobile app. This was released, creating instant access to all of our books and getting them in the palm of patrons' hands. In 2013, the app was available for iOS devices, and in 2015 for Android. Patrons can now download books to a smartphone or tablet instantly without needing to contact the library. This provides 24/7 access to our books with truly no wait time at all. This photo is of a person holding an iPhone in their hand with the BARD mobile app open. And on this slide, it shows what it looks like if somebody were to be using the BARD mobile app on the iPad. And you can see that it's very similar to what the player looks like, also what the BARD mobile app looks like on the iPhone as well. And now on to Liz.
Thanks, Jen. 2013 saw the beginning of our very popular donor wall or wall of recognition. Basically, someone makes a donation to TBBC to support our programs, and then they can get a plaque on the donor wall, dedicated to a loved one. And the plaque is in both English and in Braille. This is another one of the things that we work on with, thanks to the support of the Friends of the Library. And the photograph here shows the dedication of that wall of recognition with staff and patrons in front of some of the plaques. The donor wall is still going strong, and it is definitely one of the more popular things at the library. And we often have people stop by so that they can see the plaque that was donated for their loved one. 2015 saw the beginning of LEAP, the Library Equal Access Program. With LEAP, TBBC works with the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired to provide classes on accessible technology for computers and iPhones and iPads. These classes are held at public libraries, so we work with public libraries to make these locations accessible all across the state. We have two photos from that program. One on the left-hand side shows a number of people at one of the classes for PCs and the accessible technology. And the photo on the right-hand side is a flyer for LEAP showing an iPhone, an iPad rather, and an accessible keyboard. And LEAP is one of those programs that is still going strong today. And now back to Stephen.
Thank you. So as we come to the end of the 2010s, there's just a few more things I would like to talk about. The first of these is the Marrakesh Treaty. The Marrakesh Treaty is an international treaty signed onto by more than 100 countries. What the Marrakesh Treaty does is allow these countries to share accessible versions of their books more easily. Thanks to the Marrakesh Treaty, our world language collection has been growing quickly. Even our English language collection has grown to the Marrakesh Treaty, thanks to other English-speaking countries like England or Canada. On the slide here, we have a picture of United States Representative to the United Nations in Geneva, Betty King, signing the Marrakesh Treaty document. In 2019, NLS went through a name change. Prior to 2019, NLS's full name was the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. In 2019, they changed that to their current name, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. This name change was put into effect to better reflect the people that NLS serves. Thankfully, the NLS acronym stayed the same. On this slide, we have the official logo for the new NLS name. And to close out my section, I want to talk about one more big development that happened in 2019. That is the introduction of our Gutenberg computer system and the duplication on demand service, otherwise known as DoD. As Liz mentioned earlier, prior to the Gutenberg, all of our library cartridges came preloaded with books. Also, most cartridges only held a single book at once. The Gutenberg system changed this by allowing TBBC staff to copy book files over the library cartridges whenever one was needed. It also allowed us to add up to 8 books per cartridge. This allowed us to create customized cartridges whenever a patron requested one. This customized cartridge would have the exact books that the patron was requesting, all loaded on that single cartridge. This was extremely beneficial as it allowed us to remove any waitlists for our audiobooks. It also allowed us to drastically cut down on the amount of postage that was required to send books to patrons, as we were now able to send 1 cartridge when previously we'd have to send 8. The picture on the top left of the slide shows the Gutenberg computer system in the process of copying books over to a cartridge. The picture on the bottom right shows the workstation where the Gutenberg is set up in the library. And with that, I'm going to pass it over one last time to Liz. Or Jen, sorry.
In 2020, we saw the pandemic, and as much as we all may want to forget about this, it did have a great impact on our work. The library building had to close for an extended time and did not allow us to have in-person visitors. We were very successful, though, in continuing to provide our patrons with services uninterrupted. Because we have always connected with our patrons by phone and email, thankfully communication really didn't change. And thanks to the Gutenberg that Stephen just mentioned, it made ordering books much easier because we were able to connect to it remotely and order books. On this slide is an image of one of our staff members, Liz Kelly, working remote. In 2021, we were asked to be part of a pilot program NLS was starting, in which we were able to loan Braille e-readers to our patrons. And an image of that Braille e-reader is on this slide. Physical Braille books can take up a lot of space, and to receive physical Braille books, one would need to wait until the library is open to order those books. These Braille e-readers help in reducing the amount of space Braille takes up, literally allowing Braille readers to have multiple volume Braille books in the palm of their hands. It also allows patrons to download Braille directly to these devices through Bard, giving instant access to Braille books. In addition to the increase to accessibility these devices provide, these devices can be very expensive for someone to purchase on their own. With these now being available on loan, NLS has also made rather expensive technology available to all. Also in 2021, we saw a fantastic change to those who can certify an application. NLS updated their certifying authority list, expanding which professionals are now eligible to certify applications for potential library patrons. The list of professionals is listed on this slide. Prior to 2021, there was a decent list of those who could certify applications for patrons who were blind, had low vision, or had a physical disability. But if anyone had a reading disability, only a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopathy could sign the application. With this update, it not only expanded who could certify applications, it also changed the requirements for reading disabilities, no longer limiting to only a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopathy to sign. Now, educators, librarians, and even certified reading specialists, as well as medical doctors, doctors of osteopathy, eye doctors, registered nurses, and more, can now certify applications for everyone. This was a huge change, especially for reading disabilities, making it now a level playing field for all. And back to Liz.
Thanks, Jen. You might be thinking download and digital, what's with just, oh, can't I just have an old-fashioned book? You might be thinking like, wait a minute, just because there's ebooks available for like Kindles and Nooks, that you still like to have a paperback or a hardcover book. And Braille readers feel the same way. So don't worry, just because the Braille e-reader is there for people who like to read electronic Braille doesn't mean that physical Braille is going away. And as a matter of fact, in 2022, NLS started their Braille on Demand pilot program, which allows Braille readers to order 1 book a month that then they get to keep. So basically print on demand, Braille on demand. The image here is of one of those Braille on demand books. They look a little bit different from the books that the library loans out, because the books that the library loans out are hardcover and are built to take all that mailing back and forth and multiple people reading them, while Braille on Demand is just for that one reader. It's a great way for Braille readers to be able to build up their library and also to show the importance of print Braille. Brings us to the future. What is the future going to bring us? And I have no idea. The images here are of a HumanWare digital talking book player. Maybe our digital talking book players will change. There's also an image here of the Amazon Echo Dot. Maybe in the future, someone's going to be able to say to a device, Amazon, I want to read an NLS book, and be able to read that book. One thing is for sure, we're always going to be here working with our patrons, doing programs such as our summer reading program, our fall festival, things like the Golf Classic and the Donor Wall are still going strong. So whatever the future is, we'll be playing an important part of that for accessible reading for our patrons. Brings us to the end for questions. As Adam mentioned, this program was pre-recorded, but we are here live to now take your questions and comments about our 55 years. Thank you.